From the casual mobile games we tap on our commutes to those sprawling, immersive virtual worlds that, capture our imaginations for hours, video games are absolutely everywhere in modern life.
They really are. Hard to avoid.
And we often see them as, well, simple entertainment, maybe even a bit of a distraction, right?
Sure, that's the common view.
But today, we're taking a deep dive into video games through a truly unexpected and, frankly, unverified lens, the transcript of an investigative hypnosis session.
That's right. And our mission isn't really to present these insights as definitive facts, but more to explore the fascinating, sometimes unsettling claims that emerge from this unique source.
We're looking at the alleged origin, purpose, and impact of video games.
Exactly.
And what's crucial here, I think, is that we'll also be unpacking how to approach information gathered in such an unconventional way. Yes, that's key. So buckle up, because we're going to lay out what was observed in this specific session. And then, importantly, we'll dive into that vital question of how you, the listener, can understand and critically engage with information from sources like this.
It's a journey into both some pretty surprising claims and, well, the very nature of information itself.
Okay, let's start with a truly startling claim from this hypnosis session. Video games are described as an arcontic simulation connected by many threads to an archon.
Right. And for listeners maybe unfamiliar with the term, archons in some Gnostic traditions are often seen as these controlling, almost parasitic entities governing the material world. Obstacles to spiritual growth, essentially.
And what's fascinating here is how this ties directly into that whole matrix concept we all know.
The session basically posits that we're in a video game, a planet video game, that our reality is a simulation. It's a very literal take on that idea.
Very literal. And within this supposed simulation, the session describes distinct roles, much like in a game. It suggests people with a subliminal part are the hero or heroine facing trials.
Now, when the session mentions a subliminal part, it seems to be referring to like an individual's core consciousness.
Yeah.
Or maybe their spiritual essence separate from the everyday mind.
Yeah, something like that. Meanwhile, those without the subliminal part are called interfered people or clones, acting as NPCs, non-playable characters.
Right, like background characters in a game level, they have pre-programmed roles, which, raises big questions about agency from this perspective.
And maybe one of the most intriguing and, let's be honest, unsettling claims is that hi-fi films and video games themselves are supposedly communicating this reality, like a form of disclosure from these archons.
Almost hiding in plain sight, according to this source.
Exactly. Now, beyond these, grand theories, the session also touched on some very immediate personal effects for people who actually play games.
Yeah, it mentioned that after just 1 hour of play, the effect is described as alienating.
Alienating. That's quite a word.
It is. The information talks about dehumanization, making people like locust men, which sounds, well, intense. It's likely metaphorical, implying a loss of vitality or a connection, an energetic shift.
And it's not just a feeling. There's apparently a drainage system involved.
The video game, through these threads we mentioned, is said to drain the subliminal part of those who possess it.
So it's like siphoning something essential.
That's the idea. An energetic siphoning, weakening that core essence, making people less autonomous, more open to influence. It's framed as a system of control.
Affecting young people and adults.
Both, yeah. And interestingly, the session linked things like Japanese manga, comics, to this same drainage. It stressed it's not only economic drainage, but fundamentally alienating, keeping people separate energetically. A good system of interference, as the source put it.
Wow. Okay, diving deeper into the internal impact. This session describes how video games allegedly affect the subconscious, giving it a reward.
Yeah, like a sedative. It's even compared to an antidepressant or a drug like Xanax.
A drug comparison. Okay, yeah. So the purpose is?
Well, according to this, it's to keep it quiet. To stop those natural urges, we have to exit the comfort zone, to evolve, grow, access new challenges.
So the game becomes the challenge instead of real life.
Kind of. The virtual simulation creates an attachment, described as drug-like, stopping players from asking other questions about real life or pushing themselves.
So that feeling of achievement, like having overcome a level virtually, it provides this reward or candy.
And the session claims it's more effective than actual psychopharmaceuticals or other drugs, which is, well, a pretty bold statement.
Definitely. Now, for what the session calls avid players, it gets even more intense. The subliminal part is described as being completely drained. What does that actually mean, according to the source?
Well, in this state, the person's energy is supposedly drained away, and those threads connecting to the archon become material. They create implants.
Implants, like physical things.
Probably not physical as we think of them, more like energetic constructs or blockages, tethering the person more firmly to this whole arcontic system. The more avid the player, the more drained and emptied they become.
And it's interesting how this contrasts with what the session claims were historical methods.
Yeah, like in the past, rituals, fears, traumas were supposedly used to make people lose their subliminal parts, often out of fear, thinking these archontic figures would protect them.
So why the shift to video games?
The video game system is described as very sophisticated. A tunnel people enter without fear, without emotion, and they just lose themselves without realizing it.
And a key effect mentioned is emotional flattening.
Exactly. It's called a clean drainage system because it bypasses emotions entirely. Even the highs of winning or lows of losing don't seem to matter in the same way energetically.
So if we take this session at face value, the whole system is designed for people to get hooked. It's baked in.
Right. And what's really intriguing here is this concept of arcontic evolution
Evolution,
of these entities.
apparently. Their goal is still controlling subliminal parts, but they've evolved their methods. The video game strategy belongs to the more evolved archons, supposedly.
So it's a strategic shift from things like...
From past methods, yeah.
Sure.
Like Masonic rituals or secret orders, which the session says leveraged people's emotions. Now they use video games.
And tying back to that earlier point, it reiterates the idea that this method is also a way for them to tell the truth about the Matrix being a simulation.
A strange kind of disclosure, yeah. Subtle. Okay, beyond the energy drain, the session points to recurring mental programming. Things like archetypal symbols or subliminal messages in games.
Yeah, although it notes that it depends on the video game, especially the more evolved ones.
And is there a specific type of person who's more susceptible, according to this?
It identifies a target archetype, the dissatisfied person, someone who tends to close themselves off, described as introverted.
Okay.
And once they engage, the source says it's over because they don't get out anymore. The programming goal is simple: to drain.
So for people with a strong subliminal part, maybe the system sees as a threat. Playing games is like being subjected to tests or psychic attacks.
It's the idea presented, yeah,
Yeah.
to drain them within the Matrix simulation. The characteristics of these targets are often an initial sense of inadequacy, dissatisfaction, feeling like they don't conform to the system.
Like the black sheep feeling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not finding their place. And if they're also unconscious, introverted, less combative, or less rebellious, they get catapulted and absorbed into this programmed dimension. It's a very specific profile they paint.
Let's zero in on a specific category mentioned. Shooter games. What kind of energy do they produce according to the session?
They apparently produce low frequencies of violence.
Okay, low frequencies.
And this is then linked in the session to real-world incidents, things like bullying, violence, even rape among youth.
Wow. So these games aren't just entertainment in this view. They apparently open the door for other types of entities.
Yeah, and the Archons supposedly thank these other entities for the gift of this low-frequency energy, which I have to say makes you think twice about some games.
It really does.
It's described as part of a predatory system. It facilitates the entry of other entities and provides other nourishment. The violence acted out in physical reality is seen as a kind of tribute to the Archons.
Like sacrifices.
Kind of, yeah, like sacrifices in ancient Greece, creating a system of favors between these malevolent entities. This type of game is called lethal, causing damage on a physical and etheric level.
Lethal. That's strong language. This raises a big question about the people who actually create these games. Are they aware of this alleged impact?
Well, the session claims they are clones, pawns, specifically archonic clones.
Clones.
That's the term used. According to the source, they have a pre-programmed agenda to create video games. But crucially, they are not conscious of the impact. They don't realize what they've done, lacking the psychic and intellectual tools to understand their own creations.
So if the creators themselves play these games.
There's no drainage system on them, apparently. They don't get dependent because they don't have a subliminal part to drain. The source uses an analogy like trying to explain, well, the taste of mortadella to someone from Guatemala who's never conceived of such a thing.
Yeah.
The framework isn't there.
Okay, that makes a strange kind of sense within this framework. So what does a person who's addicted look like from this perspective?
They're described as satisfied only when playing, otherwise completely apathetic.
Apathetic.
And when they stop playing, they plummet into a black state, a complete lowering of frequencies, feeling empty. They're deprived of emotion, a total emotional deprivation.
And that leaves them vulnerable.
Yeah, it leaves the door open to all interferences because they're completely drained.
Which brings us to a really crucial point. How do you detoxify from video games, according to this session? The recommendation sounds pretty drastic.
It is. Basically, take them and throw them away. Just like you might quit cigarettes or drugs, cold turkey.
No gradual cutting back.
The session explicitly dismisses that. It calls the idea of gradual desensitization or slowly reducing, and this is a direct quote, bullshit.
Wow, okay.
Very. It acknowledges the difficulty, of course. Technology is everywhere, consoles, phones. The games are always at the door.
So external help is needed.
Yes, specifically from parents or partners who must physically take them away.
And the thinking behind that is?
The rationale given is that if some active subliminal part still remains within the person, they might eventually realize this drastic step is the only way.
And it's seen as even more insidious than drugs or cigarettes.
Yeah, the source argues it's more pervasive because no physical action is needed to get the hit. You don't have to go buy anything or physically ingest it. It's just there. The subconscious gets satisfied with the illusion of overcoming challenges, keeping it sedated.
And this leads to the body being disconnected.
Apparently, yes. Even before the emotional or subliminal parts are fully drained, there's a physical disconnect happening too.
Okay. Given these truly out-of-the-box claims about video games, it naturally leads us to a really critical meta question for any deep dive like this.
Which is?
How do we even begin to evaluate, process, and understand information that comes from such a unique and, let's be clear, unverified source like an investigative hypnosis session?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? Because fundamentally, you can't just take a single investigative hypnosis session as definitive factual information. It just doesn't work that way.
Why not? What's the issue?
Well, the information retrieved in hypnosis is described in this field as potentially very highly contaminated. Think about it. It supposedly travels through many dimensions, many layers of consciousness. Distortion, voluntary or involuntary, is almost inevitable.
So it's like a game of cosmic telephone.
Kind of, yeah. And it's not just distortion in transit. The information is also interpreted by the subject in hypnosis based on their own mental structure, their beliefs, education, culture, even their past life experiences, supposedly.
Right. The source used an analogy,
Yeah.
like trying to communicate underwater.
Exactly. Using different languages and gestures where the sound and image are distorted, signals get misinterpreted. It's a messy process.
So if it's not about getting factual data, what is the purpose of this information in that context?
The source clarifies that the purpose is not to memorize data or take it as good or factual. Instead, it functions more like a vehicle of movement or transport towards the client's problem within that specific esoteric practice. It helps the practitioner navigate towards the issue they need to address.
Okay, so it's a tool for that process, not necessarily for reporting objective reality.
Precisely.
Which makes you wonder, how is reliable information gathered in this field if single sessions are so contaminated?
Well, that's where it gets really rigorous, according to the people who do this work seriously. It requires long, difficult, and tiring work, often involving a whole team conducting many, many sessions. We're talking thousands.
Thousands, okay. And what makes information reliable then?
Information is only considered good or reliable if it emerges consistently, common to all or almost all, across these thousands of sessions, conducted by many different operators and subjects, ideally who don't know what the others have found.
So it's about finding consistent patterns across a huge data set.
Exactly. Examples given of things considered reliable because they meet this standard include consistent descriptions of, say, gray extraterrestrials, their height, body, eyes, lack of certain features, or descriptions of reptilian or insectoid beings, the color of Mars, etheric undergrounds beneath major cities, specific types of implants. These things pop up again and again, independently.
But how much of the information actually meets that standard?
According to the source material discussing this methodology, typically only a very small percentage. They literally mention figures like 2–3%. The rest is considered, well, garbage in terms of objective data gathering.
Only 2–3%. Wow. That really puts the claims from a single session into perspective.
It absolutely does. It means a single session is absolutely useless for direct investigation of objective reality. Plus, there's the whole issue that a subject's subliminal part might simply not authorize the outflow of information, about other people who aren't directly connected to them.
And even if information does come out about others.
You can't be sure if it's genuinely authorized or if, as the source suggests, some other cunning entity is just jumping in to provide distorted information for its own reasons.
It reminds me a bit of looking for news online. You tend to trust a major news agency, right? Like Reuters or AP,
Yeah.
more than some random blog with hardly any followers. Because the agency has internal checks, public validation, reputation. It suggests a certain source, even if you know manipulation can still happen higher up.
That's a good analogy. It's about the rigor and validation behind the source.
So, bringing this all back, what does this mean for our deep dive into video games today?
It means that the information we've shared, the archons, the drainage, the clones, all of it, is what emerged from this specific deep dive. It's a fascinating, detailed look from one such exploration.
But not necessarily the definitive truth about video games.
Exactly. The key takeaway, perhaps even more important than the specific claims, is understanding the methodology and the limitations of how this kind of information is gathered and validated in this field.
So that you, the listener, can engage with these intriguing insights critically rather than just, accepting them wholesale.
Precisely. It's about understanding the lens as much as the picture.
So there you have it. A deep dive into video games that, well, it goes far beyond what you might typically expect. From those alleged arcontic origins to the profound energetic and psychological impacts described, and even those pretty drastic solutions for dependency.
And we've really tried to explore this material through that critical lens, emphasizing the unique nature of information pulled from investigative hypnosis. This deep dive has offered not just potential answers, but maybe more importantly, a framework for how you might think about information from, let's say, unconventional sources in general.
Yeah. Which leads to a final thought, really. Given the complex, often hidden layers of reality suggested by discussions like this, and the real challenges in figuring out what information is reliable, how does this awareness shift your perception of everyday experiences? From the games you might play or the news you consume to anything else. What other common parts of your life might warrant a similar deep dive from a completely unexpected angle?
That's definitely something to chew on. Where else might these hidden dynamics be playing out?